Hi, so our guest today is Scott Walker. Scott is one of the world's most experienced kidnap for ransom negotiators, and we'll talk about what that means later. His experience has enabled him to develop a unique understanding of what makes people think, feel, and act, regardless of circumstances, particularly during times of conflict, crisis, and adversity. So Scott's worked for the United Nations and spent 16 years as a Scotland Yard detective specialising in counterterrorism and kidnapping. And he has a new book out, which is due out mid-May, 25th of May, I believe, and provides the mindset tools and techniques to communicate effectively in times of crisis, change, and uncertainty. So welcome, Scott.
Hi there. Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us on this podcast. I think one of the big things to really talk about is your book, which I have so many questions. I've looked over it, I've read it, and I feel very privileged to have actually been able to see it before it's out in May. But I think one of the big things is that whilst you talk about, negotiating sort of really high profile hostage situations, you're actually talking about in your book how you can apply this to everyday life, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. So yeah, give us an intro about you and let us know a little bit more about your past and what's made you write this book.
Well, as you mentioned, I was a career detective at Scotland Yard, specialising in counterterrorism and homicide and intelligence and surveillance, and I was having a great career. And then I bumped into a colleague I hadn't seen for a while in the canteen one day, and I just sat down and chatted to him, and he was saying how he'd just spent the last week or so helping to resolve quite a tense kidnapping involving an Albanian gang in London. And I was just enthralled and mesmerised by what he was saying. And he offered to put me in touch with the team that ran it out of Scotland Yard, the HCNU, the Hostage Crisis and Negotiation Unit. And I put the phone call in and went through the selection process and did the training. And then before I knew it, I was out responding to kidnaps all over London, working with other negotiators, and I was having a great time. I felt really meaningful work and a good way to kind of end my career as a police officer. And I'd always been fascinated by human psychology and what makes people tick. I mean, in previous roles, I'd run informants, and I also took a bit of time out to go out to Iraq as part of a debriefing and interrogation team. So it was all about getting into the minds of people and understand, why do people do what they do? And then I turned 40. Some would say it was a bit of a midlife crisis. And a number of things happened in a really short space of time. I remember I came home having spent a few days on a kidnapping in London. And I put my key in the door. I came in and the house was quiet, and I'd forgotten that my wife and kids at the time were away. And I had a shower and went straight to bed. And then the phone rang, and in my days I woke up and picked up the phone, and I recognised the voice on the other end, and all the call said was, "Hey, she's done it." And I'm like, what do you mean she's done it? And then I realized then what he meant. And on the third attempt, my mom had killed herself. And so that was a real wake-up call for me, that there I was racing around trying to save everybody else's life. But for me, the one life that really mattered, I wasn't able to help there. So that was a real shift for me in terms of working out what I wanted to do. And so within a few months, I'd left the police, and then I joined this consultancy firm specializing in crisis resolution. And then over the last kind of 6-7 years, dealt with hundreds of cases all over the world, from cyber extortion and kidnapping to political evacuation. And then as I was getting more and more experience in this field, I was noticing patterns of what worked and what didn't, regardless of the sector or the industry or the country. And there's also the relevance to business generally, as to, okay, well, what makes the most high performing teams operate at that level? What were some of the leadership skills and the way they made decisions? What was so effective? And what worked to get the hostages back or to resolve the extortion attempt, for example? And yeah, I realized that, hey, life is one big negotiation. And that's how I ended up to where I am today.
Wow. There's so much there. I'm a little bit thrown by it. I think the biggest thing is obviously about your mum, and that's, gosh, yeah. The idea of that you were going around and, as you say, saving everybody else. Yeah, that's actually that really does hit, because I think so many people are in that situation, especially in the workplace, where everyone thinks that you will always have your family and everybody will all just stay as they are. You don't, and you throw yourself into work and you end up spending more time at work than you do at home. And yeah, when something actually happens at home, that moment of realization where you suddenly go, oh my gosh, yeah, I went through a stage where I burnt out quite a few times when I was in earlier on in my career, and my personal life was completely shot to pieces while I just focused on my career and building it. And yeah, the amount of people that I think sadly have gone through sort of similar situations where the shock, it's just almost like a shock that shocks people into, oh my gosh, I've thrown myself so far into work that I completely forgot about what was going on at home. Yeah, it's really hard.
And it also actually was a great wake-up call. I mean, I know the importance of mental health in the workplace is really taking center stage now. But what it really showed me was actually the mindset, the psychology is key. And that's what I talk about in the book, about the first step to becoming the best negotiator you can be, the best communicator you can be, is you've got to master your mindset. You've got to harness that. Call it a superpower, call it the red center. And I talk about that in the book, about what that is, around nobody's going to come along and tap you on the shoulder and go, hey, it's all going to be okay. Let me show you the way. This is about tapping into that inner resource and developing that resilient mindset that no matter what happens, you're going to be able to deal with it. And particularly when you're facing life or death scenarios, which thankfully most people won't. But if you're dealing with a really difficult conversation in the workplace or with a colleague, an ego-driven boss, or whatever it happens to be, is you need to get your mindset in the right place first. And that was, I guess, the catalyst. That incident was a catalyst for me to really dig deep behind the neuroscience and the emotions around, about what's going to be the best to succeed.
Yeah. When I read your book, I think the first thing that popped into my head was you write in the book about first seek to understand before being understood. Yeah, and that I said to my colleague in the office, I was like, right, that is going on a post-it note and it's sitting on the top of my screen, because that is something I need to always remember. And actually, that is key to communication. We spend so much of our time, and it is probably our own ego, but we spend so much of our time trying to tell people stuff and say, this is what your job is, and this is how we want it to be, and this is how we want you to be, that we hardly ever sit and listen to other people's points of view, their view of the world. And yeah, that to me was, I just was like, oh my gosh, like mind-blowing moment, because it really did make sense to me that, yeah, I think it's, as you said in your book, it's all very much, we spend so much time in ourselves, and And when we go into the office in the mornings, if we're in a bad mood, we will make the people around us in a bad mood too, because we are all over the place. And it's taking that time to, meditation, or your techniques in the book as well. It's sort of, you need that time just to decompress and go into the office in a calm state in order to lead and to
Yeah.
be the right person, I guess, the right person in the office to inspire and motivate others. It's so simple, but it's just almost as if we've all forgotten how to do that, because we've just been going through COVID, and currently here in New Zealand we're going through awful weather conditions, with flash floods, and cyclones, and God knows what at the moment. But it's that everyone's heightened, and it's like we haven't learned to relax anymore. We haven't learned to. It's that whole fight and flight, or
Yeah.
fight or flight moment. So yeah, that one little quote was enough to go, wow, yeah, that makes so much sense. It is
And
about,
here's the thing, though, in terms of building on what you're saying there, Nikki, around, you get to choose, really. Yeah, bad stuff happens, challenges and issues show up throughout the working day. You can't control what happens to you externally, but you can sure as heck control how you respond to that. And through no fault of our own, we've been conditioned to have like a knee-jerk emotive reaction to things, as opposed to taking the time to pause, even if it's only for a split second, to then go, well, actually, is there another way of looking at this? There's a great line that the power is in the reframe. Am I focusing on this as the problem or the challenge, or actually this is an opportunity to do something different here? And you and I could experience exactly the same set of circumstances. One of us could respond in doom and gloom, this is the end of the world, and the other one will be, hey, do you know what a great opportunity this is? And that comes down to the mindset, being able to communicate, particularly with ourselves. People talk about negotiation and communication as if it's some kind of official business thing, but actually we're communicating and negotiating with ourselves all day long. And that is the underpinning thing I really would like people to get away from the book. Is it starts with you. Yeah, all these great tools and techniques and strategies that I cover, but actually, unless you can master yourself there first, it's just going to be built on a foundation of sand.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. Well, my role primarily is in communicating and helping with helping leaders to communicate, and or managers. It's always management. I feel
Yeah.
they're the lost souls in the workplace. But it's so much. I mean, we talk about meditation, and I know in the book as well you talk about visualization. All of these things have been done to death. But what is it that people, how do people just leave their emotions at the door? How do they, everyone says, oh, just, visualize success and meditate and, and center yourself. But how? How, when
Okay.
you've had like, a situation, I suppose most people, like you've got your kids, or you've got traffic on the way into work, or the train's late, or there's all these things that happen. And it's definitely you choose how you feel. But how when all it just feels like everything's going wrong, how do you, and it's not even 9 a.m. yet, how do you keep your emotions in check?
That's a really good point. And I think it's not about resisting or denying the emotions. I mean, my studying of neuroscience to kind of explore what I was learning in the real world application in these cases all over the world. When I started digging a bit deeper into the research, we've evolved. We're feeling creatures that think, not thinking creatures that feel. So having these emotive reactions is a normal and natural part of being human. And I say to people is feel the feeling. This is not, there's no good or bad emotional feeling to have. It's what you do with it that counts. And so my advice, I guess, is to feel the feeling, but drop the story. Don't worry too much about, particularly if it's a negative or a disempowering one, about, well, Nikki has said this, this, and this, or she hasn't done that, and therefore it's making me feel X, Y, and Z. Well, actually, just feel the feeling in your body. And I remember going into some pretty tense negotiations where I can feel the churning in my stomach or the tightness in the back of my shoulders. And it'd be just 5-10 seconds of going, right, what's going on right now in my body? And I really feel that feeling. Don't worry about why I'm feeling it for now. And then the body will pump all these chemicals through for about 90 seconds or so. And then afterwards, it's like, right, I can take some breaths. I can maybe go outside. I could go do something slightly different, come back in and go, right, what was all that about? Am I just stuck in a story that I'm looking to blame, name, or shame somebody or something else, rather than go, right, what are we really dealing with here? Being quite objective about it. So to go back to your original question there, it's not about being devoid of emotions or pushing them away. It's actually embracing them, stepping into them, feeling them fully. And then afterwards, once you've calmed down and your nervous system is back in balance, to then explore, okay, well, what has maybe triggered that, or was a reason for it?
Do you find some people are better at that than others?
Yeah, well, if you ask my kids, my teenage kids, they know exactly what buttons to still press with me to test me every day, and I love them dearly for that. No, I think it comes down to practice, preparation, and it's trying these techniques out in the low level stakes. Okay, just keep practicing and practicing it. And then the muscle memory and the neuroplasticity in our brain allows us to become more and more conscious and competent when we're actually applying them. So it's like you want to build muscle or get fitter. You don't just go to the gym once, you have to go. And I say to people, this is about small steps consistently applied. It's not going from a standing start to some kind of hero here. It's just small steps throughout your day. Just really practice checking in with the emotions. You've just had a phone call, or you get cut up in traffic, or the Amazon delivery is late, or whatever it happens to be. It's like, right, just take a second, feel the feeling, drop the story, and then over time, it just becomes easier and easier and easier. And then that comfort zone that we like to stay in just gets expanded, and we just keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it.
Mm-hmm. That's actually really, really good advice, because I think there's so many times where you think you can either do it or you can't. And you'll try it once or twice and then you just go, oh, I'll give up. I've tried to stay calm in this situation and it's just not working. Or people tend to bottle it up and then hold it. So then when they do explode, they'll say, well, 2 weeks ago or a month ago, or, and it's almost like they haven't, I guess, felt the feeling and gone through that process. They've actually just gone, I'm not going to get annoyed about it right now. I'm going to hold on to it. And then they hold on to it nonstop. So that whole idea of practicing it and knowing that you won't get it right straight away. And it is like a muscle that you just need to just keep at it and keep trying. And it will get easier the more you practice it.
100%. And this is it. We will beat ourselves up about it so much when we say something or we do something that afterwards we think, oh, why did I do that? But hey, just start again. You've got to start where you are. The past has gone. I know it's easier said than done, but there's nothing you can do about it. And it's just focusing on the present moment and going, right, okay, well, what can I do now? How can I bring myself to this conversation, this person, to really continue that conversation, that negotiation, that relationship?
There's a really interesting part in the book that mentions about emotional intelligence. And we hear a lot about emotional intelligence at the moment, but it's actually how do we apply it and how do we actually take the time to understand other people, but empathize. And I've really loved how you mentioned about that's not pitying people. That's not, you're not feeling sorry for people. You're actually, empathy is completely different to that. And that was something that really, I think, struck a chord, because there's so many times where people think that when they empathize with somebody, it's almost that they're superior to the person that they're, empathizing with. So I was really interested in that, because I'd love to know, what I don't like. It's all well and good learning about emotional intelligence and reading what you read in books, but actually using it day to day and using it with people that are quite difficult to reason with, right? I mean, I imagine I've never been in a hostage situation. I hope never to be. But how, I mean, I can't imagine that you have a few chats with those people and then they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll hand everybody over. Don't you worry about a thing. There has to be some real negotiating there, some actually really tough stuff that happens. And so, yeah, can you elaborate? Can you tell us more about it? I guess that's,
Sure.
yeah.
It's imagine you've got an antennae or a radar, sensory acuity, where you constantly trying to pick up a signal for what is going on for this person. Because the golden rule of highly effective negotiation is it's not about you. This is not about you. I mean, it's about you in terms of you need to be in tune with how you're showing up, but ultimately it's about the other person. So it doesn't matter if I'm negotiating with a kidnap in the jungles of West Africa or Latin America or Philippines, Middle East, wherever it is, or I'm in the boardroom, or I'm dealing with a colleague, a friend, or my kids. It's until people feel safe, seen, heard, and understood, they won't budge. And if they do reluctantly, that has all kind of knock-on unintended consequences further along the line. And this is not necessarily about capitulating and giving people what they want first time round. It is about looking to meet their needs, their human needs. What are they looking for here? Is it about a bit of significance? Is it about saving face? Is it about respect? Is it about feeling seen? What is it? Rather than the demand for $1 million or the pay rise or the chocolate bar or whatever it is people are demanding. And so it's really, like, again, the cliche, putting yourself in their shoes as best you can as to, okay, what are they really looking for here? What are they really needing? And then meeting that. And then once they feel seen, heard, safe, seen, heard, and understood, then you can start, through empathy, then you can start to build that rapport. Then you can start to bring about a bit of trust-based influence. Because ultimately, until you and I are negotiating, until we trust each other, then we're never going to really fully explore all of the options or reveal as much as we perhaps want to. So it's really about developing that radar about, okay, what's that other person's model of the world? How are they viewing things? What are their beliefs and values and rules about what needs to happen? And often the things that remain unsaid. And that comes from listening, deep curiosity, and going back to a point you mentioned at the beginning of this around sometimes people just wait to talk. No, I can see, are you actually listening or are you just waiting to speak here? And so by doing these things, you really enable people to feel as if their viewpoint is being heard. And this is particularly powerful when you disagree over something. Like I didn't agree with anything the kidnappers were doing. It doesn't matter. I still need to bring a whole load of empathy and being able to reflect back to them their position, what needs they were looking to be met here. And once I did that, we were then able to come to a successful resolution. And there's no different to the boardroom or the family home there.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's it, isn't it? It's that ego of you don't want to back down. And I'm the queen of this. I don't want to back down quite a lot of the time, even though, and I was talking to a friend about it the other day, that even when you know at the back of your mind that maybe that person has a point, it's almost that you're not ready to let them win just yet, and it's your ego completely takes over, and that is actually it. It's taking that time just to drop that and actually realize that it's not about you, it's about them. And actually, by it not being about you and about having that, it's not
Mm.
manipulation really, but it is almost you're actually taking the time to understand it from their point of view, so that then you can not win, but yeah, like understand it and find a way to compromise. Yeah, so it is really really interesting because initially I know I was thinking, gosh, like your your day at work is like literally life and death. Whereas my day at work, if I get something wrong, chances are, I might get told off by a few people, but I can, no one's lives are at stake. So it's actually really, really interesting when you learn and you hear about your techniques and how you can work with other people. Because if you can do it, and you can do it with, hostage people that have taken people hostage, and are, I guess, and this is me just guessing here, but quite angry about a certain situation, then how can we not do that with people
Mm.
that we work with or people in the home? Or, it kind of makes you realize that you can actually apply it to day-to-day life.
Yeah. I mean, if I brought my ego to the table in a hostage scenario, that's only going to end one way. It's going to put the hostages at risk of greater harm. It's going to really alienate the family and the client. So yeah, there was a life or death necessity to really learn how to park that ego. It's not been about the hero. It's been about being really curious and open awareness and empathy and compassion around, well, let me understand what's going on here. And as I said earlier, it's not about capitulating to people's demands or giving people whatever it is they want, regardless of the circumstances. It's just being able to meet their needs or really understand or reflect back to them so they feel heard and understood.
Yeah, yeah. So how? I mean, you've worked. Obviously, you went into consultancy afterwards, and you've been working with companies and and leaders in whether it's their own businesses or actually within big global companies. But what? How have you found the working with them versus working in a real life and death situation? Or, I mean, don't get me wrong, companies are, and I used to work for shipbrokers, and they actually ended up having a cybercrime issue, and they were telling, and I remember them saying, we had to get negotiators in. So yeah, so I know that there are certain situations in workplaces where, say, workplaces in companies where that could happen, but for the everyday, I mean.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. And on those, whether it's a kidnapping or a cyber extortion or whatever the crisis is within an organization, dealing with the quote unquote bad guys was the easy bit. Dealing with the corporations or the organizations, we called it the crisis within the crisis, and where there would frequently be office politics, egos, competing demands at play, and probably 80% of my time on a case would be spent managing the client, usually the business, usually senior leaders. And so that, again, that developed a skill set in me in terms of being able to really navigate those tricky waters, particularly within a corporate setting. And so now when I go into companies, it's really about taking those skills of, hey, it's more about listening than talking, and really understanding, okay, how to lead and make decisions when there's uncertainty, when there's conflicting information. It's not about being the hero in all of this. It's being this collaborative approach it needs to be a team approach, because one person can't communicate or negotiate, make decisions, lead the team, and everything, you need key people to come and do that. And what I noticed in my experience was the organizations that worked effectively really understood that.
Mm. Yeah, that is actually a big thing about organizations, because exactly as you're saying, the politics is there is not a single organization that I know or a company that I know that is not that all get along, all love each other, and it's a fantastic place. There could be good places and fantastic places to work, but there's always some form of politics or house of cards going on. But I think also it's if you're trying to talk to a CEO and you're trying to say to them, in a kidnapping, as you say, you've got to do it this way. There's probably a lot of times where those people have never been told you have to do that, you have to do this, and they don't have the final say, or they should be taking advice from somebody else that they don't know as well.
Well, I mean, my job was never to make decisions or tell people what to do. It was more about bringing calm and a bit of centeredness to all of this. And as the title of the book suggests, bringing order out of chaos and provide options and recommendations and effectively be that trusted advisor. And I think that applies to any form of communication or negotiation. If you find yourself having to tell somebody what to do or being really direct in that, it can backfire. And I think that the most successful negotiations I've been involved in have been where it's collaborate, not subjugate. It's really taking a collaborative approach. And again, if the CEO or the country director or whomever is kind of being a bit quote unquote difficult, that's because there's a need for them that needs to be met here. Is that there's something going on for them that needs addressing. And often that gets manifested in behavior that may be seen as being difficult or whatever. And so again, it's taking the ego out of it, taking a step back and going, okay, what's really going on here? What's going on for this person for them to react like this? Is this about them having to save face, appear in control, whatever? And then you just look, okay, well, how can I help them get that?
Yeah, there is a chapter in the book which did make me laugh, and it's negotiating with difficult people. And I felt like, could you just take that bit out of the book and that become a book in itself? That's
Yeah.
that's what a lot of people struggle with. It's not just negotiating; it's negotiating with difficult people. But yeah, it is a really good point that you're making. Actually, that it isn't telling; it's advising. And I think that is actually key when it comes to working with others, collaborating, and exactly as you said, it is the whole listening before speaking type of thing. I'm conscious of time, so I've really loved actually talking to you because it's so interesting.
Likewise.
But as we finish off, just asking, what does winning in work mean to you?
What does winning in work mean to me? I think it's waking up every day and looking forward to actually engaging in whatever work means, and it's having that sense of purpose, contributing to something greater than myself, and balancing that age old thing of achieving things whilst also enjoying the journey. And I think it's probably the best way to describe it for me.
Yeah, I love that, enjoying the journey. Not many people say enjoying the journey when they're talking about work, but
It's true. Is if you just get to the end of the day, you're ticking all your to-do list and you achieve, but you're not enjoying it, you're not fulfilled in the process, then why bother?
yeah, yeah. I think that a lot of people can relate to that. Yeah. Finally, your book is out in May.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it's out in New Zealand on the 25th of May, but you can pretty much catch it on Amazon and all good bookshops.
That's right.
Yeah. So how can people get in touch with you and find out more about what you do?
Yeah, no, thanks. I've got my website, which is scottwalkerbooks.co.uk. And there people can pre-order the book, can find out how they can work with me in more detail, as well as signing up to a newsletter where I include some of the tools and techniques from the world of negotiation and communication, and I share that every month. And yeah, that's probably the best place to find me.
You have an online course as well, don't you?
I do, called World Class Communicator. And again, if people go to the website, scottwalkerbooks.co.uk, they can find all the links to the book, the courses, and the newsletter as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.